How are you, Steve?
Good, thanks. How's everyone?
Pretty good.
Enjoying the sunshine. Not necessarily the warm weather, but the sunshine will do.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
absolutely.
You miss us, Steve. We're not there to aggravate you in person.
Sorry, what?
I said, you miss us. We're not there to aggravate you in person. Or I should speak for myself. I'm the one.
Virtual aggravation is a thing, but we'll just say it's less pronounced, maybe. I think we're live. Yeah, we're live. Huh. So
Says
it
it
auto
is, yeah.
started. That's not what I wanted, but hey.
Yeah, I don't know if it did it because I entered the settings after I started the meeting. I logged in and while I was waiting for you, I was like, well, let me go into the website.
Yeah,
No.
but on the YouTube streaming settings itself, you can have auto start and auto stop.
Oh.
I have it set to apparently auto starts. As soon as it sees a stream, it starts, but not auto stop. I have to manually stop it. But the point is, other people shouldn't be able to see anything until the designated time. So the streaming can be going, but people, if they keep refreshing the page, they see nothing until the actual time. So maybe I'm seeing it now because I'm the owner, but now it's 9.
Is that coffee, Steve?
Yeah, it's coffee.
I am a fan of the coffee in the morning.
Remind me to talk to you about coffee. It's
All right.
a very strange relationship.
Is
Jesse's
this-
the only person I know who's spoke up against the Church of Caffeine.
I don't drink coffee, but that's just me.
Peg
Not
and
a-
Jesse's a heretic.
Peg
Blasphemy.
and I, in the morning, coffee. It's not a day without coffee.
Yeah, but that's the problem.
Burn Jesse at the stake.
No, I go back
All
and
right,
forth.
we're a little
on it.
after 9. I guess we could get this party started. So good morning, everyone. Good day. We have. I see we have one person from the Children's Museum. Hey, Ann. Good morning. We've got clients in the Zoom. So this is Halves for everybody who this might be a new experience for. For Have presentations, we will have six going today. They have 15 minutes. 15 minutes to give you that presentation and 5 minutes Q&A. After the Q&A, mostly it's just faculty ideally, but anybody can come in. Yeah, Steve, let people in. I guess since you're a host, I'm not getting the things now. It's all you. Or make me co-host. And I can be. Okay. When I made you co-host, it kicked me off. There we go. Give everybody a second. So, all right, back to it. So we have 6 presentations today. Amusuem will be our first one, starting Halves for us. And then we'll go vrcules, fiplay, chain reaction, fearless night owls, and then help appear. So as per last year, what we'll do is if you're not presenting, if you could turn your cameras off and mute your mics. And if you are presenting, please turn your cameras on so we can spot you, and we'll actually spotlight you to the camera. And you should be able to share your screens now when you're ready. All right, we're looking for spotlights. There's 1, 2. I think that's everyone. So whenever you're ready, team.
All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, can go ahead and get started. Good morning. We are a museum, and our project for this semester is to develop an original augmented reality AR installation inspired by the work of Rube Goldberg using the Arena mixed reality platform. And in order to set up some background for our project, the client for the semester is Ann Folenkamp and the Museum Lab over at Children's Museum Pittsburgh, which means that our installation is targeted to a slightly older audience of 9 to 15. And we're using the Arena platform developed by the Conics Research Center to support our virtual interactions because it enables a few key important elements for the project, including multi-user networking. It's a really robust system and simultaneous AR and VR viewing for guests to experience the machine both from the museum itself and from their own homes. So the final element of the project is actual Rube Goldberg machines. So this cartoon gives you a sense of the types of stories and interactions and humor that Goldberg so regularly imagined. And through a partnership with Rube Goldberg, Inc., the Children's Museum has already built some incredible fully physical realizations of these machines. But one of the limitations of these machines is that they aren't able to include some of the live elements that are tropes in so many of his cartoons. And so one of our major goals is to incorporate AR into these machines to bridge the gap between these live elements from the cartoons and these incredible, physical pieces. And so our deliverable is comprised of two main parts. There's the installation itself, which is both the physical props that we'll be purchasing. So that's props, electronics, and mechanisms, as well as the virtual scene that gets mapped out on top of that, both in AR and in VR. The other element is a thorough documentation packet detailing instructions for setup and takedown and maintenance, because this installation could potentially move between a few different spaces. And so setting it up with the same dimensions at each space will be incredibly important. So as with every Rube Goldberg machine, they're all designed to accomplish a simple task in an over-engineered and inefficient way. And the task of our machine is a simple way to mail a letter to a friend. So in this diagram, anything in white is going to be a physical prop and anything colored will be virtual. So starting on this machine, you'll walk up to a typewriter and begin to type. And as the carriage runs across, it will trigger the very first interaction of a ball rolling over the edge and bumping into a fan, which will kick it on. This will open a door to a bird cage, releasing the virtual bird. It'll hop across, grab onto an umbrella to glide across this gap between two bookshelves using the fan below, carrying the letter with it as it goes across, landing on this bookshelf, pecking on this series of books, sending another book tumbling over the edge onto a fireplace bellows, inflating a balloon, causing a watering can to tip over, water a plant, and make flowers grow. These flowers will attract bees, which will send a ball tumbling down to a hairdryer, turning on and melting wax down onto the letter, which has been carried all the way through this machine to the very end, at which point the guest would receive a virtual version of the letter that has been mailed on their device. Now I'll pass it over to Bella, who will run through the experience flow.
Thanks, Jack. So our guests in the museum room, they will see the typewriter in the middle of the room with a board of guidance, and the guests can pick up the devices and open Arena. There will be instructions in Arena to follow. After scanning the April tag on the desk, the user can start the typewriter and begin the chain reaction. So after the chain reaction, the whole machine has to be resetted. For some part, the electric appliance and the animation will be resetted by the Raspberry Pi. And as the museum suggested, learning how to reset the part of the machine also helps the guest to understand how that works. So for the physical part, this will be resetted by our guests. For the art part, our style is coming from the museum itself. Our color palette is some color that I extracted from the museum. The museum has a very vintage and antique kind of style. So I extracted the red tone part from it and added the opposite color green tone to it. Left part is our final color palette and the right side is the material I've been using. For our theming, as Jack said, we have some physical props and some virtual assets. For the virtual assets, the overall style is combined with antique and old cartoon style, as the umbrella is made of an antique style of fabric that I created with pattern and ribbon. The bird comes from directly from Rube Goldberg cartoon. The book here is an old leather book, and watering can is combined with the vintage flower sketches in rust. The props in the next line is a physical props that we brought, but it is also cohesive to our style. Next, I will pass it to Adeline to show the animation.
Thanks, Bella. For the first part of our interaction, we have the bird as animated element, and we imagine what this cartoony bird would look like in terms of bringing it to life. And we draw inspiration from the book, The Art of Rube Goldberg. We picked the eco bird as our bird's name, and to add on the humor and absurdity of the Rube Goldberg machine, we thought the eco-bird should be a little bit goofy, playful, and full of curiosity about different stuff in the world. So the bird could help us trigger many parts in our Rube Goldberg machine as we described in our first part of interaction. After we have a portrait of the eco bird, we made a set of animations for our interaction that fits the bird's personality. The bird hops in the bird cage, jump around to see the world, peck around to interact with different things. And when he finds an umbrella, he wants to try to use the umbrella to fly above a fan instead of flying himself. Tech-wise, we figured out a pipeline to author all these assets and animations in GLTF formats. GLTF formats is one of the standard file formats for 3D scenes and models. Compared to well-known 3D format FBX and OBJ, GLTF has the strength of being able to load it into web browser directly and fast. And also this is the 3D formats for our platform Arena as well. So the problem we were facing in the beginning of this project is to figure out our team's workflow for authoring all these GLTF files. We talked with the Arena team and we got to know that they have been using Blender for GLTF 3D assets authoring. However, our team's skill sets are more aligned with Maya instead of Blender. But by default, Maya does not support GLTF format export. So we researched different GLTF export plugins and choose Babylon as our export plugins in the end. It supports exporting textures, animation groups, and baking animation frames within the GLTF file. And we also figured that we could export GLTF with Substance Painter for static models without using an extra exporter. We also made a documentation of our GLTF pipeline and could share our knowledge with future teams. When it comes to playtesting, we were trying to make it as authentic as possible. We polished Scribble gallery scan we got from faculty John Bellish and create white model for our interaction pieces, so that everyone could use a URL link to enter this virtual space to playtest in the future. And next, I will hand it over to Hal to talk more about our tech implementation.
Thank you, Adeline. For the tech stack, we are using an augmented reality dev platform called Arena, which developed by CMU ECE departments. So not like the traditional AR platform is only allow single user to access one thing at a time. One of the advantage of Arena is this platform allow multiple users to access one thing at the same time. Another advantage that we are using Arena is accessibility. So users can just click in using the link and using the WebXR capable browser on their phone or tablet to join the Arena to play the Rube Goldberg machine. It's very tech friendly for the young kids and very tech friendly for the old people. Even though Arena have a lot of advantage, however, it's still experimental and under developing tech stack. So we are also growing and cooperating with Arena dev team. We have encountered some obstacles during our development process. For example, unlike traditional game engines such as Unity or Unreal, Arena do not have the object movement and object transaction API. So instead of that, we are using some animation mixer and animation dispatch API. We use animation mixer API to play the animation, and we use animation dispatch API to do the position transaction, to do the position change. Also, unlike the traditional game engine, there's no collision event trigger, so we handle that with some counter to count down Pacific time and trigger a serial of events. That's going to be the demo. As you can see, we use animation mixer to play the animation, and we set a counter to trigger another animation at a Pacific time. And next we'll have wizards to talk about the hardware part.
Thank you, Hao. And as for creating match moments in the AR experience, we use the Raspberry Pi to connect physical space with a virtual world. For the physical to virtual, we use a ultrasonic distance sensor to detect change in the physical world and then change the virtual scene. For example, when the physical bird cage is open, the virtual bird flying out animation will be played. And for the virtual to physical, we use the IoT relay, which could control when to provide electricity through the coding. So we will turn on or turn off the electrical appliance in the physical space when the virtual event is triggered. For instance, and when the virtual bird begins to fly, the physical fan is turned on and to help it. By these two methods, we could exchange between physical and virtual in our local machine to create the magic moments. And combine the design, art, and tech. This is the first introduction demo we create in the ETC project rooms. So when the bird cage door is open in physical space, the virtual bird will be fly out. At the same time, the physical fan is turned on to help the virtual bird fly across the gap, then reach the bookshelf. The bird then pegs on the physical books and trigger the rightmost virtual bird to fall down. We divide our project into 3 interactions part like this, and then combine it together as a whole local machine. Consider, next page. So consider our project should be moved to the museum and restored easily. We use Aperture as a reference point to map virtual scene to physical world. So in a new space, we only have to set out Aperture in the physical space and check reality transform of virtual object are correct. Then we can run the machine easily. For the maintenance issue, now we set the VNC in the Raspberry Pi. So we could control Raspberry Pi, find issue and find bugs remotely by desktop and laptop. It will be convenient for us to set a machine which may run about 3 to 4 Raspberry Pi at the same time. Not only developing the regression, we also dip into the arena, like implement particle system, create some cool visual impact like wind effect when fan is turned on, add listener to create more interaction between guests and objects, like when the guest click on the bird will be shocked. In order to make the virtual object in the AR scene more realistic, we will add light and shadow for virtual objects. The problem we face now is the occlusion problem in the AR. Just see in the demo, the virtual bird overlays the physical bird cage, making it seem like the bird not in the cage. So we will discuss some possible solution for this problem with Arena developer team. As for the playtesting, because of challenge of test physically, if it will be remote test, we will plan to test in the VR with Arena link or test by sharing the AR scene in the mobile devices. However, because clients hope this experience could encourage guests to visit museum physically, so we perform in-person tests on priority basis as machine as built. So for a summary of our project, we are developing an AR local machine installing from the museum for the museum and target audience is ranging from 9 to 10. And we will bring live to a local machine with the goal of simple way to mail a letter to friends. And we're using the Arena pen from a Raspberry Pi combine physical objects and virtual assets to enable magic moments. And this is, well, thank you for helping. And thank you for listening. Now open to questions. Thank you.
All right, congratulations team, great job. Anybody have any questions, just let us know in chat or Dave will help moderate if you just raise your hand. And Go for it, John.
So I apologize if I missed this, but what is the narrative or the throughput for this? One kid is doing it with family or friends around them, and how do you reset? Is there like an animation that resets, or I might have missed that. I just didn't get that feel.
Sure. So as for throughput, because this is a networked system, anybody who clicks the link to open it, they'll all be able to view the interactions happening simultaneously. So if you have a family, you'd be able to have, say, both kids or all three kids viewing this at the same time. So it is open to more than one person experiencing at once. And then the other part of your question was about resetting. That would be, so we're trying to limit any physical resetting as much as possible, just because Rube Goldberg machines can have so many little pieces that would just slow down movement from one guest to another guest. So we're front loading most of the resetting things to just like resetting the ball at the very beginning, which is simultaneously connected to the bird cage. So resetting that would also reset the bird cage. Anything else would be automatically reset by the Raspberry Pi, kind of restarting the arena scene.
I would just recommend making that cool for the users too.
Yeah. So we'll work on having some visual effects that occur as you're resetting it.
Thanks a lot.
Well, you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the integration of the graphics into the physical space. Are you able to do any image-based lighting or PBR rendering like this? Or one area of concern too was integrating things like the bird cage and how you can do a proper occlusion. That seems like a really hard choice to actually pull off rather than a post for the bird to sit on. Can you just talk a little bit more? I know you briefly touched on it, saying you're working on shadows. Maybe you have some tests that you've done. What's the direction there?
So for now, for occlusion problem now, we just have to because we were developing arena platforms and the computer graphics elements is controlled by them. So we will have to discuss this with them. And the possible solution of like a occlusion problem, now we just thinking about maybe we can create some models for the catch. So there are also the catch in the virtual scene. So it will can be seen in the AR scene. Or maybe it's possible we can change the color of the bird to a little transparent. So it will seem like there are the catch scene and the bird will be overlaid together. Yeah.
Thank you. Just real quick, the cage is going to be particularly hard because those wires need to be exact.
Yeah.
And you'll need to come up with some sort of calibration. But the opportunity there is you have a known physical space with known 3D objects, and you might be able to utilize those 3D objects to help your calibration. So you'll look into it.
Jesse, you got a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question. How do you feel about your ability to do the registration, to make sure that the physical and the virtual are solidly lined up? Do you feel good about that? How has that gone in testing?
Yeah, so for mapping now is yes, it's always designed by the distance between everything with the Apple tag setting. So it's the most important part is that the devices have to detect the precision of every tag very correctly. So everything will be mapped in the correct positions. So now we will record the relative positions of each object with our upper tag. So I think this is a method to map everything together. But yes. So in the future, if we want to move to a museum, I think we would also to put every stuff and set the upper tag with the correct positions on this record.
All right, that's time. Congratulations, team. Good job there. So if amuseum can turn off their cameras and mics, and if vrcules can turn your cameras and mics on, I will find you and add you. Here they come. There she is. Right, I think that's everyone. Yes, yes. All right, team, whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. We are Project vrcules. This is our team. And our faculty advisors are Ricardo Washington and Dave Silva, with Ricardo also doubling as our client for this project. And we are a discovery project, and we're creating a prototype that explores cognitive and physical training and virtual reality. Next, I'll go to a bit more detail on background and how we came to establish the design goals of this project. So for this project, our client, Ricardo, came to us with specific requirements. We were required to pick a sport, dance, or martial art and to focus on it for the rest of the semester. Second, we were tasked to build a prototype in virtual reality. And lastly, we were to create a prototype that combines both physical and cognitive training into one experience. So there's a lot of physical training games on the market. There isn't any that combines both cognitive and physical training into one. And this idea stemmed on the belief that cognitive training ideas can be used to enhance physical training. And we were trying to explore the potential ways that could work well in VR. So now I'll hand it over to Tianyi to talk more about our design goals.
Thanks, Sally. Among all kinds of dance, sports, and martial arts, we picked boxing as our main focus. There are three major reasons for us to pick boxing. Firstly, in our early research, cognitive ability is as important as physical power in boxing. During a boxing match, lots of cognitive behaviors happen. For example, boxers need to control their emotions, choose the correct combos, and read their opponent's moves. Secondly, although boxing requires footwork, we decided to put our main focus on upper body training like punches or combos. Lots of boxing are hands in hands, and that is exactly where VR is best at. Last but not the least, our client Ricardo practices boxing himself, and thanks to him, we also met with an experienced boxing coach. Because of that, we can have valuable expert input on our design and our results. Under the consideration of these three reasons, we chose boxing as our physical training focus. Next slide, please. Because we were instructed to create experience with VR as our platform, we did several research on the advantages and disadvantages of using VR to do fitness training. First of all, virtual reality provides a much more realistic experience than traditional platforms. With VR, we can get rid of that extra layer of representation and give our players a better experience with first-person view. Secondly, in order to be a good boxer, a great trainer is very important. However, in the current situation, neither hiring a trainer to visit one's home nor going to the gym is a safe move. Because of that, virtual training can be really helpful. However, the drawback of VR is also pretty obvious. The problem that troubles us the most is definitely the lack of foot tracking. Because of that, we decided to tell players to keep footwork in mind while putting our main design focus on upper body training. Next slide, please. We then researched on how cognitive training can affect players' physical training. Most cognitive trainings focus on four aspects: memory, attention, information processing, and calculation. We brainstormed on how we can change these trainings into boxing practice and decided on pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is kind of a combination of short-term memory and information processing. It helps beginner boxers to train their combo memorization and helps experienced boxers to practice their tactical awareness by recognizing their opponent's moves. Next slide, please. As mentioned in the previous slide, we met with the boxing expert and fitness instructor, Francis Braza, and he gave us many valuable information that helped us design our prototypes. In our first meeting, Francis said that footwork is important, but as we are using VR, we should definitely focus on punch training. He then introduced several methods he used to train amateur boxers in the gym. A very common strategy he used is to light up a wall or dummy, and his students need to hit the lit up part. He also mentioned about another way of abstracting the punches into numbers. For example, 1 for jab, 2 for cross. Then he calls out these numbers and his trainees have to respond correctly. After we created our first prototype, we showcased it to him and got his input on it. He gave us suggestions on keeping boxers focusing more on the punching bag and approved our design in general. Next slide, please. With all the previous knowledge, we designed and iterated our first prototype. Currently, after the onboarding tutorial, we ask players to practice punches and a series of combos. Then we ask them to adapt by teaching them to include variations in their combos. After that, we get rid of the instruction and train the players to predict the next punch by themselves. With that, let's take a look at our prototype demo video. For this prototype, we started simple with basic boxing combinations. Players are given a simple 3-punch combos and would have to repeat the combos. Similar to how boxers do repetition training to get faster in their punching. When they hit successfully, they get a green indicator, but if they hit incorrectly, they get a red indicator. When we then vary the patterns, player will need to remember and recognize the changes and perform them correctly. While boxers need to practice combos, they also need to change it up in the ring to become less predictable to their opponents. With this prototype, they would be able to establish their own repeating patterns and learn to change it based on the variations we teach them. So now I'll pass to Shara to talk about our user experience.
Thanks, Tianyi. Apart from basic combinations training, boxers often have variations in their combos to make it easier to catch their opponent off guard. Among all, we chose repeating hooks variation as our first direction, which is throwing a hook twice. By predicting the patterns on their own and bring them into their own strategies, players can enhance their pattern recognition and working memory. During our workflow, we need a surface to display the tutorial. In order to make the overall experience immersive and natural, we decided on broadcast using television screens that often exist above arenas during competitions, instead of a basic 2D surface, to immerse the guests as boxers. But having pattern instructions on the television screens could be distracting, because Francis mentioned boxers should focus mainly on their opponent's shoulders and torsos when they're in a match. So we switched our design to keep the indicators and feedback system on the punching bag to reinforce this practice in the experience. So now Eileen will talk more about the art and sound design.
Thanks, Shira. And art and sound design was another factor that we took into consideration. For our prototype, our boxing expert Francis mentioned that verbal and visual cues was a technique he used to train his boxers. Therefore, we spent time incorporating visual and audio feedback in our design. Guests will be able to more easily recognize the cues, which is beneficial for training cognitive capacities, particularly pattern recognition and working memory. We created visual and audio association with patterns. For example, the numbers will be light up for corresponding punches, and also the successes and failures will show up on the dummies as well. Francis also mentioned that training outside the boxing ring is different from training inside the boxing ring. Therefore, we created an environment to simulate this setting. As we experiment with more cognitive capacities, we're planning to design patterns where players would need to respond accordingly to their opponents and prepare them to recognize these actions. So apart from sound design, music is another component that we're looking to experiment with. Francis also expressed that boxing is a lot like dancing, so having rhythm in their moves is a good way to continuously land hits on their opponents. So boxers would train to music to establish rhythm, and we are planning to incorporating music to enhance players' experiment and motivation in boxing. We believe based on the players' experts' feedback, music would be a good way for guests to process information and patterns more successfully and eventually improve their performance. And now I'll pass it over to KUAN to talk about technical challenges we have.
Thank you, Elin. So after research and discussion, we decided to choose Oculus Quest as our platform. Because first, VR is very easy and convenient to mimic real boxing environment compared with any other platform. And second, VR can track the position of a user's hand and hands, which is good for detecting boxing movement like punching and dodging. And third, the hand tracking function provided by Oculus allows the user to play without controllers, which means they could grab their fist to punch instead of holding controllers. But there are also some disadvantages we need to take care of. First, hand tracking is not as accurate as controllers, especially when punching very fast. Second, since Oculus uses camera to capture the hand position, if the hand is outside the user's view, the position can't be detected. And third, we can track the footwork only with Oculus device. So the biggest technical challenge we had was how to recognize different punches. In the early test, we identified the punches by detecting the hand velocities when the interaction happened. For example, if the Y component of the velocity is much bigger than X and Z component, the punch would be recognized as uppercut. But when it was implemented into our first prototype, we found a problem. Because of the variety of boxing posture and hitting positions, punches might be incorrectly recognized. For example, if a short person did a head-level jab, it might be recognized as uppercut. Another example is if the user gets too close to the punching bag when he is doing uppercut. The hit might happen while his hand is still moving forward, which causes the uppercut to be recognized as jab. In order to solve this problem, we came up with two solutions. First, limiting the hitting area. For example, if a jab needs to be detected, we'll ask the player to hit area number 1 on the punching bag, and a punch outside won't be recognized as jab. Second, besides the velocity, we also check the hand movement after the interaction has happened. For example, if the hand is moving upward after the hitting, it will be recognized as uppercut, even when sometimes the velocity gives us a different answer. This way, we can get more accurate tracking for our pattern recognition exercises. Now I will pass it to Sally to talk more about the project moving forward.
All right, thank you, KUAN. So for our project moving forward, after Halves, our advisors believed that there was actually a lot of potential with our current prototype, and there was a lot of room to keep iterating and exploring. So currently our plan is to continue iterating our existing prototype on what we found to be important based on our expert feedback. We found that apart from pattern recognition, information processing, how fast boxers process information, is something we want to continue to experiment with and incorporate into our design, as well as multiple simultaneous attention, which is the ability to multitask with success. Boxers not only need to be on offense, but also on the defense. And we're looking to layer that component as well into our prototype. And lastly, audio implementation and music was another aspect that this expert said was helpful, especially when he's training by himself. And we believe that would not only help make the experience more immersive, but aid in processing information. Like we previously mentioned, Francis uses verbal cues to train boxers and also occasionally trains to music. So we really want to explore how this would affect overall training and cognitive performance. So for our schedule after Halves, we will continue the pattern recognition by getting more feedback through outside playtesting. So far, we've only been able to get feedback from our expert, and we're looking to send out APKs to people who own Oculus and getting playtesters that way. And then we want to continue layering on our prototype, adding information processing and simultaneous attention in the following weeks. We really want to experiment with layering more aspects of boxing into our design, such as starting to think about how we can incorporate head tracking into the pattern recognition and making our environment and opponent more responsive to the player, as well as like updating our animations and models to reflect on what we find. And of course, really diving into what works well for cognitive training in VR. Throughout the semester, we will continue to incorporate more sound design and document our findings along the way. In the last weeks, we will plan on finalizing our findings in our prototype and finish up documentation and finally handing off our project to our client, Ricardo. So for this project, the metrics we chose are, of course, prototyping, gameplay interactivity, and client requirements. And we are Project Hercules. We are a discovery project, and we are creating a prototype that explores cognitive and physical training in virtual reality. And thank you, and we are now open for questions.
All right, great job, team. Congratulations. And John Dessler has a question. Go, John.
So I realize you're taking advantage of the controllerless feature, but I was just curious, since impact is such a visceral experience in boxing, did you think about haptics, or is it just not worth the return on investment for that? The feel of impact.
Your question is,
are you considering haptics at all? Does it help the cognitive thing or no?
We are definitely considering reintroducing controllers. Like KUAN said, we did have some problems with like accuracy and tracking without the controllers, especially when you're punching too fast. So we were thinking that as we increase difficulty and the complexity of our prototypes this semester, we will consider reintroducing the controller, then possibly haptics as well.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, hey, thank you. I have a question. Considering your combo, building up speed is important in combination punching. Have you thought about including some sort of timer? So, you know, as you start out, you're going to be slow, do your combos in a slow way to perfect them. But then to increase the ability to practice your speed of your combination punches. Have you thought about that and worked on that at all?
Originally, we did implement some timers, but for this prototype, we took away the timer because of the learning curve that currently is right now. So for like when we start experimenting more with how fast players can like pick up the patterns and learn, we're gonna definitely test like their speed, because when it comes to combined physical training with cognition added, something that we've researched and learned was that speed was something that increased over time. So we are thinking about adding like timing or like recording their time as they're learning.
So I had a question about jab and punch accuracy. Could you let us, I know KUAN, you talked about this and you have some heuristics now, but can you give us a baseline of where you are now with how accurate you can detect jabs versus, you know, punches or uppercuts, and where you need to be for your subject matter expert to say this is, you know, good training? Where are you now and where do you need to be?
For now, since we use two ways to make sure that the punches are recognized correctly, so how do I say that? We can recognize most punches. We can see that, but it is possible that if you want to mess up with the system purposely, it's still possible. You can use some like some slow movement, or to let the recognition to be incorrect. So for now it's at least for the playtest we have, it works well. But in the future, if it have to if in the future, I'm not sure how accurate it would be to be honest. Yeah, but we'll still working on that if we have more problems.
I think for that.
For one more question. Right. Go ahead, Sally.
Oh, yeah, just to add on to Mike's question, a lot of our problems would be solved if we reintroduce the controllers. So we're thinking about definitely testing again with the controller to see if that will definitely solve our issue completely. So we decided not to use controllers at first because we definitely want to like mimic the feel of shadow boxing, and we thought that Oculus tracking was actually pretty good. But as we are testing it and making our prototype more complex, we're realizing it's definitely coming a problem down the line, and we will try to use controllers again to kind of fix that.
Thanks.
I wouldn't worry too much about that. When you're holding gloves, when you have a glove on, it feels like you're holding something. So it's not that big of a deal, I don't think. But ask your expert.
All right, that's time. Thanks, team. Great job. Congratulations. So if you all can turn your mics and cameras off. And fiplay, you are up next. If you can turn your mics and cameras on, I'll find you and spotlight you. Oh, there's one. One more. I'm looking for Thomas. Where is he? Okay, that's everybody who's here. So whenever you're ready, team.
In fact, can we change the order because Thomas is not here? Is that okay? We change the order with other team. We won't waiting for Thomas a few minutes.
No Thomas. Well, I'm looking. I don't think everybody from Chain Reaction is here yet. Are they? Let me see. Maybe that's Shivan. No, we don't have everybody from. Oh, we got Oscar. Claire. All right, Chain Reaction, can you go? Would you like to go? Got everybody there.
If we're all here, let me just yeah.
We can make this work.
Yeah, Chain Reaction, if you want to flip cams on, we were just checking our remote slide control. So
all right, I'll unspotlight fiplay and I'll get you all there.
Cool.
Good job. Chain Reaction.
Awesome. Just to check in verbally with everyone, can I get a thumbs up if the remote slide was working for you? 2, 3, 4. Oscar, you good?
I'm missing Oscar. Where's Oscar? There he is. All right. Thanks for stepping up whenever you all are ready.
Cool. Just want to get these things working the way they should be working. Cool. Slides are visible for you, Drew. Awesome. And let me just make this work for me.
Does it say for everyone else just Derek Chin started screen sharing, not an actual image?
Oh, wow.
I cannot see the slides.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go. Well, there's Claire now. I see Claire.
How's that for you?
There
Yes,
we
that's
go.
there they are. Okay.
Cool. Ugh.
Flexibility.
Yeah, on some level. Back in person, we didn't have to check if our slides could be seen from the audience. Cool. Everyone good from chain reaction? Get a thumbs up. Awesome. Let's get this show. Oh, sorry about that. I'm just gonna turn off my phone so nothing interrupts this. Cool. Get this show on the road then. So good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. We are Chain Reaction, and this is our Halves presentation. So this is our team. These are our faculty as well as our client Raul from the Games for Change Foundation. And we're creating a multiplayer experience about nuclear testing for the Games for Change Festival. The metrics on our mind right now are transformational content accuracy, play testing, and gameplay and interactivity. So we'll be talking about a few things here today, but just to get us started with some context to scaffold the rest of our discussion, I'll be kicking it off. You might recall from quarters that we were using the transformational framework to structure as well as scaffold our pre-production process. So with regards to audience and context, the experience we'll be making will be deployed and played by people at the 2021 Games for Change Festival in July. So like last year and with the Detox project, the festival will be held fully virtually over a video conferencing software called Hopin. You could think of this software looking a lot like Zoom, right? You can see other people as a series of panes and panels, as well as hear their voices. Based on Detox's experience as well, we're expecting on the order of 40-ish plus players or people interacting with the experience. Additionally, we have a 60-minute or 1-hour session. So putting that all together, whatever we build will be played over a video conferencing software by 40 plus people in the span of about 60 minutes. So our domain is actually nuclear testing in particular, narrowing down from nuclear threat more broadly. But our high-level purpose for the project is to share the untold stories of US nuclear testing. We recognize that our audience has an existing perspective on the issue. However, we believe that if they knew more about where that perspective came from and whose agenda it represents, that they would ultimately feel differently. So we were inspired by our experience discovering the barriers in the ETC community, as well as us as a team, as well as by the process of research itself, where we found ourselves actually transformed from interacting with primary source material and coming to learn more about the subject. Currently, we have a paper prototype that we've play tested that Shiva will unpack, as well as a digital build that's in progress, integrating pieces of that paper prototype and launching to a more fully virtual environment, more like the festival. So I'll pass it off to Kat to talk more about our transformations in more depth, as well as our designs for accomplishing them in more detail.
All right. Thank you, Derek. First, I will talk about the transformational goals that we have for our experience. To summarize the audience initial state that you're trying to transform, they believe that they don't need to think critically about nuclear testing. They know very little information about this issue, and they're skeptical that testing is even relevant. After our game, the belief will be that the narratives they've previously heard don't tell the whole story. They will come to understand different perspectives and complexities, and they will come to see that previously ignored narratives are important to tell even now. In order to accomplish this goal, we want our guests to feel curious about nuclear testing, investigate the untold stories, and reconcile the conclusions they've come to with other perspectives. Our guests will assume the role of an investigator with one of several specific motives, examine artifacts of nuclear testing, and compare the narrative they've constructed with other guests. The research and reconciling phase will take up the bulk of our hour session. We'll split the guests into smaller hop-in sessions until the very last activity, where we'll all come together to discuss how this experience each small group had differs. To further break down the gameplay, let's start with the curiosity phase. There we go. Yes. At the start of the experience, guests will be given an introduction to the narrative and one of 4 different roles to play. The roles aren't final, but some examples might be a public interest lawyer or a medical researcher. They'll be asked a series of role-playing questions, including what they already know about nuclear testing. These questions are designed as a means of indirect control to get the guests to look at this issue from a specific limited perspective. It sets us up for introducing the guests to other perspectives later, and it also serves as an icebreaker. Next, the guests will move into the research phase. This is where our knowledge transformation comes in, as the guest is exposed to new facts and details about nuclear testing. They're instructed to figure out what happened at this nuclear test site in advance of an important decision that needs their input. From a game design perspective, we want guests in each role to prioritize investigating different perspectives. The guests will see an abandoned nuclear testing facility conference room in the browser. They'll click on different artifacts to inspect them, like documents, scientific equipment, and audiovisual artifacts. While each guest will look at their own instance of the area, we want them to use the video and text chat of Hopin to talk to each other about what they find. The gameplay feels both like a detective game and a virtual escape room. Most importantly, we won't be highlighting the important part of each artifact or giving any commentary on them. This is inspired by games like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Her Story. We want the guests to create their own interpretations of what they find. It'll give guests a more firsthand look about how the stories they've heard about nuclear testing came to be. Finally, the guests will do the two activities of the reconciling phase, narrative construction and group discussion. For narrative construction, our guests will answer the same questions, will answer new questions with the same mechanic as the curiosity phase to interpret the meaning of the artifacts they found. Broadly, they'll answer for themselves which artifacts are most important, what do they mean, and what should we do about it? This is all within the frame story of making a recommendation for a legislative budget committee. The guests will be asked how much money they'd allocate to different approaches that legislators could take on nuclear testing legacy. Finally, our guests will be directed back into the main Hopin session for a role play discussion. The entire group of guests with different roles will attend the budget committee meeting. They will discover that each role constructed a different narrative from exactly the same information. This is the climactic moment of our belief transformation. Our guests will see that the narrative they've just constructed does not tell the whole story. It leaves another perspective out. With the moderators taking on the role of senators, we will ask them why they chose to prioritize different information from other guests and what they learned from other guests' narrative and budget decisions. Now I'll discuss a few important things about our narrative design. Our game tells a lightly fictionalized version of true events that happened at the Trinity and Nevada test sites, 1944 to present. We want to treat all these events with the utmost respect as we adapt them for this specific setting. We'll share the following different perspectives from people affected by nuclear testing, but in particular, we want to emphasize downwinders, which are communities affected by testing against their will. This is because this perspective is the most ignored by the public. Our artifacts are created to showcase how information about nuclear testing is constructed and disseminated. Some narrative threads include science recommendations for safe testing being ignored, testing being justified to local governments and the public, a lack of government motivation to prove wrongdoing after the fact, and downwinders not having complete information about the health impacts they were facing. Our narrative is nonlinear and epistolary. It won't be possible for a single guest to encounter every artifact within the time limit, but it's most important that they notice a pattern. Now I'll pass it on to Oscar to talk about how we're implementing this.
Thank you, Kat. Yeah, so I will go over the technical details of our project. First, I will talk about the platform that we choose. We decided to make our game web build because, as Kat said, the major part of our game will be roleplay and exploration. So we believe that each player should have their own screen instead of the style of Air Console. And since Hopin, the software that Game for Change Festival we use is actually accessible on our website. So meaning that a web browser will be the most accessible platform for the audience. And next, I'll go over the functionalities that we're going to have for our game. And first, of course, we will have several interactable environments for exploration. The player can click on artifacts that interest them to view evidence and try to figure out what happened here. And although player can not go back to previous environment after they move on, they can collect artifacts to carry on the whole game. So to support this, we will have an inventory system. There we go. Yeah, so we have an inventory system which player can collect evidence and put it in their bag. But one special thing about this is that we actually provide very limited slot for this system, meaning that the player will need to be careful about what artifact they would like to carry on the game. And next, as Kat mentioned, at the end of our game, we will have a budget allocation system at which player will assign a specific amount of money to several different areas based on their previous gameplay experience. And this decision, as well as the forms that the player filled in and even what items they have in their inventory, all this information will be sent to our server, at which a dedicated script will analyze these data and generate graphs for display, and so that we can use them at the reconciling phase and open discussion for the guest. So in total, the whole flow goes like the guests enter the festival in a website while hopping, and then they'll get a link from us to go to our game. And we, as the host, we share our screen in hopping, and we also take information from our server to display graphs and open discussion as a host in the hopping section. So yeah, that will be all for the tech part. Next, I'll have Claire to talk about the art details.
Thank you, Oscar. So as we have mentioned, we're designing a point-and-click detective style game. The environment will therefore play an important role in our narrative. The team had a discussion about whether we should go for a top-down view or side view. We believe top-down view tells more information about the layout and the locations, while side view tells more about the details and the stories of an environment itself. Therefore, we chose to go for a side view to serve better for our narrative and the design goal. We also made the decision to make a 3D environment instead of 2D because it is easier to modify the layout in a 3D environment, and it also fits in our skill set more than 2D. We used a game called Danganronpa as one of our other references because this game uses its 3D environment to create a more immersive and satisfying investigation experience. We also believe that using 3D object will create a more interactive game experience. For example, in Ace Attorney, players are able to rotate and zoom in key evidence to find more hidden information and details behind it. And this is a mechanism that we will have in our game as well. The color tone we're going for is mainly cold and desaturated, not only because the color tone fits the serious and the critical topic we're telling here, but also reflects the age of the facility since the testing actually happened decades ago. We want our game to reflect the reality, so that we decide to go for a relatively realistic art style. So on the right is the screenshot of testing 3D object that we have already made. Since the artifacts we will have will mainly be articles and a research report. So a 3D model of book is something that we want to start first with our goal spike. Next, I will hand this over to Shiva to talk about playtesting.
Thanks, Claire. So our first step was a paper prototype that we designed to answer a bunch of questions. The first criteria was to see if this 3-phase experience felt natural and subsequently get a feel for how the entire flow of the experience panned out. The second criteria was, of course, to test some of our transformational theories and specifically how these phases of curiosity, research, and reconciliation fit into our flow. So we managed to do 3 paper prototypes in person with our roommates, some single person, some multiple people, with roughly each session being 25 to 35 minutes. We also play tested with our faculty and our client with some of the iterations included in them. Moving on to takeaways, I'll start with some of the ideas that got validated. We presented a bunch of images and documents based on true facts, and all of them being mostly evocative in nature, naturally kind of led to curiosity. And as we predicted, the research phase turned out to be the most exciting phase, and it fit very well into our role-playing structure. All this validated our design for the engagement factor we were looking for. And for the lessons learned, we first had to we put in a fill out a report kind of action at the end, which seemed like a weak action, especially given the relatively intense previous phases of the game. Another thing that we found that it was often confusing for the guests to decide what had to be taken seriously versus what shouldn't be. And we understood that it ties in with the balance between fictional and actual factual artifacts that we present. Lastly, the research phase, since it was mostly single player like experience, guests needed constant reminders of what their greater goal was to keep them going. So all these takeaways kind of tie in to our transformational design that we have laid out, and we would be iterating this in the future. So to touch upon the challenges, playtesting is going to be a challenge since Hopin as a platform is different in some ways to Zoom, and we see ourselves playtesting in Zoom, at least for the next few prototypes. Scaling up our design for multiplayer is going to be a challenge, but we intend to solve this through multiple roles and their goals for better engagement. Both these challenges have to deal with the attention budgeting and engagement part of the experience. Ultimately, we want people to engage with the story more than struggling with the tech. Another final challenge that we see is like striking the right balance between puzzle solving and research, which we think heavily ties in with engagement versus the transformation that we're going for. So that said, based on the challenges, we would like to finalize the narrative and get our WebGL build with Hopin tested in the coming weeks. Once we playtest on Hopin, we'd like to scale up the experience on Hopin and be able to test with at least 20 players towards softs. So that said, we are Team Chain Reaction. We are building a multiplayer experience for the Games for Change Festival happening in July on the topic of nuclear testing. And we're open to questions.
All right, good job. Congratulations, team. Way to go. Stepping up early. I see John already has a question. Go, John.
So I saw you had icebreakers, and a lot of this is discussion, like a discovery and then discussion. Is that true? Right. I didn't get a feel for how you moderate this. Now, we all know how brutal video conferencing discussions are. So how do you anticipate that working?
Yeah, I can take this one. So at the festival in July, they ran a virtual festival last year, if you call the team Detox, and our client has provided the information that with their specific audience, they did not have any problems last year with getting people to talk in video conferencing. That said, we are setting it up such that there are a maximum of 4 roles. So one team member can be running the main hop-in session, streaming what's going on to people who maybe came late, and 4 of us, 1 of each in the smaller breakout sessions until we all come back together at the end. Does that answer the question?
It sort of does, but some people love to talk, some people don't. I'm just wondering about the people that get carried away. That's all. Yeah, you did answer my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on the time period. We're in 2021, looking back at 1940s, different time periods. What are we looking back at? And how do you give enough context for that time period to better appreciate the choices made in that time period?
Totally. Yeah, so the events that we are discussing range from 1944 all the way to the present, because contrary to popular belief, these issues still do continue to affect people today. So the visual design will place this in an abandoned facility that's been abandoned for maybe 40 or so years. And our artifacts will be dated to the 50s, 60s, 70s. However, it's not necessarily important that our guests construct a mental timeline of events, but that they notice patterns in the ways that different communities have been mistreated and different narratives be left out. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, just looking back at the 1940s, there was so much stuff going on because of the war that you may need to, nuclear testing was viewed as essential and important for the war effort. That fades away over time. And I'm just wondering about whether you're providing enough historical context instead of a knee-jerk, nuclear testing is always wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be important. Yeah, because the story that's been previously told often does come from the military perspective, and we want to honor that and maintain that perspective, while also emphasizing that you might not have heard about the downwinder perspective, ultimately allowing guests to come to their own conclusions about what's most important to them. So we don't want to leave any part of the story out, just acknowledge that it has been left out before.
Time for one more question.
What's
Go ahead,
the biggest?
Ricardo.
Yeah, so you guys mentioned that you were going for a more realistic art style. I have a question about that and balancing the gameplay versus the engagement, you know, with the subject matter. How do you plan to use that art style to get this to skew the way that you want it? Or do you think that that's going to be a distraction? And how do you plan to account for that?
Yeah, I think I can take this part. So we actually have already created a demo where you can actually click on the object. And once you click on a specific object, like a more detailed article or a map will pop up on the screen. So for the art style itself, the reason why we choose to go for a realistic style, as we have mentioned, we want the game to reflect the reality, and also this style is something like the artist is good at in our team. So we think this style is like easier for us to, to do in this project. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess Ricardo, just like to add real quick, I think one thing that came up in discussion was using this kind of desaturated color tone was in some ways like meeting the expectations of our guests where they are, as much as we want to communicate like the ongoingness or like the presence of it, right, to the current day. There's this reality that these facilities have been used and a part of, American history for the last 100 years. And so I think the reality of the portrayal comes from, I think, meeting our guests where they are.
Right, that's time, team. Congratulations, great job. So if you can turn your cameras and mics off, and if fiplay, I do believe Thomas has joined us, so we can get them going. Oh, get you all in here. Let's see, cameras on, mics on, I will find you. All right. That is everyone. So whenever you are ready.
Okay.
Okay. So hi everyone, we are Team Fiplay. This is our team. Our advisors are Jules and Mo. Our client is Skip Cromwell from CHEN. CHEN is a New York City-based startup company that combines financial, hip-hop culture, and technology to help create the first financially successful generation of underprivileged students. So based on our client's goal, our target audience is underprivileged high school students in New York City. The problem for the project is that they need accurate financial knowledge and they don't trust the financial tools. So based on the background, our project goal is to create an educational game to transmit the financial knowledge, including budgeting, banking, loans, and investment, and also a storytelling element to help them take advantage of financial tools. To do this, we are creating an experiences that will emphasize simulated aspect of key financial activities. On top of the simulated financial aspect, we see storytelling as a major opportunity to get the student interested in our gameplay. So for the financial simulation and cultural storytelling, we have been working closely with our client Skip, whose expertise is invaluable in both areas. Next, I will introduce our game flow. So at the beginning of the game, we allow players to choose their characters. So they can choose from a male or a female Black high school student character. After that, so when the game started, the player will generate it on the main street. He needs to go to the bodega. And bodega is a store that is authentic to our target audience. The bodega is run by the player's uncle. He will serve as a financial mentor to players. And now, as you can see, they are talking about the bodega transmit. So the uncle would like to give his bodega for the player to run. And also in other rounds, the player can communicate with other customers or characters and then trigger other stories. After the talking, the player can go to manage his bodega with inventory pages. And this is our basic info.
Since we're designing for high school students in New York City, we choose our theme as managing a bodega. Instead of explaining dry financial concepts on screen, running a business put all the financial concepts in context. The player will manage inventory, interact with banking services, make investments in order to make profits and grow the business. The bodega also transfers New York culture and neighborhood into our game. Because we want to make our game down to earth and relatable to the target audience, we set the location of the bodega at Harlem. The player can talk to local customers and complete help quests from customers. The player will use their own effort to support the community. Our game is round-based. Each round is 1 month. The bodega simulation sets the basic mechanics of the game. The feature will be unlocked every 4 rounds. We have 10 story topics and are distributed into 40 rounds. We have 6 basic mechanics in our game. The feature will be unlocked every 4 rounds. We have 10 story topics and we have 6 basic mechanics into our game, which is bodega management, banking, credit card, loan, and community. The player unlocks these features by talking to customers and completing their requests. The story serves as a tutorial to play the game and also deliver our educational messages in dialogues. Besides 6 basic mechanics, we also have 5 more story topics. Hip hop is the style that speaks to our target audience. Budgeting, college loan, and tax come from our survey and research. We will have an ending party at the end to conclude the story. After the story ends, the game will remain endless.
So as you saw in the earlier video, the game will start with a story segment in the first round, which helps explain the context. Why is the player running a bodega? Basically, they need to help their uncle. And here we'll also have a tutorial to help teach a player how to do the basic gameplay. So the basic loop involves selling items to customers. The first thing you need to do is check your demand, see what your regulars want to buy. Then you can plan to stock certain items in your inventory. And the last thing you need to do is go to your budget and make sure that your purchases and the money you have actually add up. So just like in real life, you need to balance it. And then you can click next month and see how much money you made. So that's a round, and the game will be basically a quick loop of doing that turn over and over again. So every 4 rounds, there'll be a story segment, and each story segment will introduce a new character and also potentially a new game mechanic. On round 4, after 3 turns after that, there will be a tourist from Japan who doesn't have an American card, and so they try to use the ATM and they can't. And so this will trigger some dialogue, and then the uncle will suggest to you, hey, maybe it's time you open the bank account, and will explain to the student the importance of your banking services and your savings account. And then the player will unlock the savings account mechanic where they can transfer money to their savings account and earn a little bit of interest, just like in real life. So 4 rounds after that, on the 8th round, the player will meet another new character called Jake, who is like a rapper, like a music maker, and he will try to buy something from the store, but his credit card is maxed out because he always pays the minimum. And then there'll be some dialogue with there'll be a discussion between you, the uncle, and this guy, and you say, hey, but the minimum is the minimum, that's what I'm supposed to pay, right? And then, knowledge will be gained, and the uncle will say, hey, speaking of that, it's almost time you opened a credit card. So then the player will unlock the credit card mechanic, and you'll have a credit limit, and you'll see your credit score. And basically on your budget page where you see everything you purchased, you have another button that allows you to switch purchases onto the credit card. And then you don't have to pay for them this round, which is great. You can buy more stuff, maybe more items or upgrades. right away, but then in the next rounds, you have to pay them back as a credit card payment. And if you use the credit card responsibly, you can increase your credit score in game. We also have a bill system, so things like rents and utility will show up as bills. And each bill has two options. You can either pay them now, or you can try to postpone them up to 2 months. If you postpone them, you know, it's pretty bad because that reduces your credit score, just like if you were delinquent on payments in real life. But we wanted to capture, you know, sometimes the incredible pressure of businesses that have to choose which bill to pay. Your credit card payment will also show up as a bill. And you can choose whether to pay the full amount or pay the minimum, which is $25 unless it's less than 1% of the full amount. And obviously you should pay the full amount, because if you only pay the minimum, you'll pay an extra 20% or more interest rate on the remaining outstanding payment, and that'll add up quickly in game. So players might learn a lesson through gameplay about managing their credit card correctly. So 4 rounds after that, on the 12th round, the player will meet Sora, a very loyal customer and a woman in the community. And she's distressed because the bathroom is broken. It's a disaster in there. And the uncle will suggest, you know, the bathroom's been breaking down so much that it's probably time to take a loan out and renovate the bathroom. So then you all go to the bank together, and the bank teller will explain what a loan is, and there'll be some dialogue explaining the ins and outs of loans to the player. And then the player will unlock the loan mechanic in game, where you see your credit score that you built up based on your responsible usage of the credit card in the previous rounds. And if you manage to build up a good credit score, you can access much larger loans with more favorable interest rate. You can choose between 3 loan options, but if your credit score is in the low end, you can only get the worst loan option. So depending on how responsible you were with your credit score, you could get more upgrades and accelerate your income more quickly with a large loan. Yeah, so this will teach the players the value of a credit score.
So for the next story is about the stocks. So the character in this chapter is Abner, the player's best friend in high school. So one day Abner comes into the bodega with his newly purchased exclusive Air Jordan sneakers, and he rambles about the release schedule of some fashion brands. So then the uncle joins the conversation, and he states that instead of purchasing sneakers, the player should use the money to make investments in these brands. And then uncle will explain the concepts of stocks, index funds, and virtual coins. So right here on the right side is the UI of our investment market. So we provide multiple choices for making investments. The purpose of having this investment market in the game is to let the player to know the uncertainty and the risk of different types of investments. So we are not making the stock market as a single game, but we do want our players to know that there exists different types of investments, and we want them to know how this works. So we by flipping the narrative and educating teams about power of investing brands versus consuming them. And this is the detail page of the stock part. So players can buy and sell shares here, and also check the profits. So in order to make the game more realistic, we implement 3 different types of stock: uptrend, downtrend, and no obvious trend. So the last story of the game is about the community. Tristan is the character here. He buys a lot of supply for his bakery one day, and the player needs to help him to carry all the stuff back to the bakery. So on the way back to the bakery, Tristan will introduce the community to the player, and he will also mention that the community is planning to build a new park, new school, and a new library, so that player can have the choice to make donation to those new buildings. So the idea here is that we want our player to become the pillar of the community, and to realize that how community is important in the real life. So after finish all the story parts, player can free roam in the game world.
So for the game wireframe part, the problem we want to solve is how to integrate so many functions and show them hierarchically, and let players feel interesting and convenient to operate the game. So after some research and analysis, we decided to follow the rules of visual design principles, because visual design presents complex information in a simple way that our audience can intuitively understand and act upon. We use questionnaires to find out our audience understanding of financial knowledge and their attitude towards banks. This video plays the part in how players go through the tutorial. Next. Okay, so this video plays the interactivity of the Bodega function interface. Our Bodega connects the inventory system, the budget system, sales system, and the billing system, hoping to make it easier for our players to use. We establish the hierarchy of our game interface through the systematic analysis of the game function. So this video plays the interactivity of the bank function interface. As mentioned earlier, our bank will have three functions: checking and saving account, credit card account, and loan account. When the player runs the banking system for the first time, the game will introduce the mobile bank function to the player, so they can check their bank accounts with mobile banking at any time. Through a lot of investigation, analysis, and comparison of the simulation game interface, we finally made our current game wireframes. Here we put some interface for the simulation game, which is called the Transporter Manager Tycoon. It's one of the games we have referred, and it's currently available on Steam. At present, we have done 2 playtests and gained a lot of valuable opinions and suggestions. These 4 categories are functions that we need to improve as soon as possible. After sorting out and analyzing the feedback of playtesting, we plan to have a playtest for our target audience, the high school student, next week. In the future, after more playtests and feedbacks, we will continue to modify our game world to make it more reasonable and convenient. Here is a plan after the midterm presentation. We plan to put the dialogue system into the game in the week 8 and use 4 weeks to do playtests and polish the game at the same time. Thank you.
Good job, team. Congratulations. So anybody have,
John? I defer to Carl or Scott. I've been taking them. Good.
Carl?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the total duration is that you expect people to be playing it, and also who's writing all this?
So the game will remain endless after the story ends. So basically, the player can enjoy our game as long as they want. And for
how long do you think it'll take them to get to the end? Or through the 40 steps?
So from our playtesting, so each round is about 3 to 5 minutes. So if there are 14 rounds, that's kind of like an hour thing.
30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes you can click through, when you're not sitting through the story, you can click through several rounds pretty quickly.
Do you think they can learn all that in an hour?
You might also lose and restart. That's also a possibility.
All right, thanks.
Scott?
Most debit cards work internationally. Rather than a Japanese tourists, it seems like a better, more motivating example would be a local person who couldn't get money out because their account was overdrawn. That's a financial lesson.
Yes, thanks for the advice.
Ricardo?
Yeah, quick question about the art style and the UI. So you guys have a lot going on, a lot of information. I wonder how you using the art style to help to direct that. I wasn't clear on whether or not what we were saying was the proposed final art style and how that relates to UI. Again, there's a lot of screens and a lot of information going to pass back and forth. How are you guys unifying all of that so that we can process all this information, learn what's on each screen, the lessons, etc.?
So for now, the UI part shows our layout. It's not the final UI. We didn't put the semantic in the UI part right now. So we plan to do the 3D games. So because we want the player to have a more real immersion and the free shuttle in the community. So the UI will follow the 3D art style at the end. Yeah. So it's combined the 2D and 3D together. So when they when the players enter the inventory, they will go to the 2D page like that.
Brenda?
Is that answer your question?
Yeah.
More or less, I have some others, but somebody else can go.
Yeah, I had a question. Early on in your slides, I thought I saw a mention of a college fund. Was that true? So I'm wondering, how does planning for college fit into your narrative?
So the college loan comes from our survey. So about 60% of students that takes our survey, they want to go to college after graduation from high school. So that's why we want to introduce college loan to them, because that's relatable to them. So we want to let them know their private loans and also federal loans, and we want to teach them how to choose the best loan that fits their family situation.
All right, that's time. Thanks, team. Good job. Congratulations. Way to go. So if you all can turn your cameras off and turn your video off, cameras and mics, and then Fearless Owls, you are now up. I will find you all. Let's see. I don't see JD. Are y'all missing JD? There.
I'm here.
Gotcha. Sorry. That's everyone. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, let's start. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Let's go. So, hi everyone. We are Team Fearless Night Owls, and we are making a project called With Evil. So, here is our teams. JD, our technical artist. Harry, our 2D artist. Me, Leon, I'm the producer of the team. Ariana, our 3D artist. And here are our instructors, Ruth, John, Mo, Kyle, and Ricardo. So for our goals, we are working on a live action animated film called Wood Evil. which is a story about a person who lost in a soul-consuming forest, and we are also creating a pre-package for future animation team. So for our goals, what we are requested from previous animation studio, we are making a mixed media animation, which means a virtual character with the live environment. But we made some skill set shift since we don't have a rigor in our team. So we made decision that we will make a live action animated shot, which means the live footage with the virtual environment. And we want to talk about a story about a haunted forest, and that comes the idea, the Wood Evil. So for the quarter, we got some feedbacks about our scope and story, which means scope is that we have two large scope, and we decide to cut down some redundant plot to make the length of the whole animation shorter. And we are also make the adjustment to the story, which means to adjust the character motivation, why the character getting into the forest. Next, I will let Harry to talk more about 3D animatic.
Thank you, Liam. So before we start, our story depicts botanists that got lured by the wood evil within the forest while studying the plant and ecosystem in the forsaken forest. Before we jump into that, I would like to mention that we use this 3D animatic to help us establishing pacing, getting correct camera angle, and setting up framework for our final piece. Therefore, the 3D animatic right over here might not be aesthetic pleasing as you expected, because we use many simple objects to represent our final product. Next slide, please. You can see the protagonist step into the forest to study its ecosystem and planet as it is part of his job and interest. Then the title show up and gives us a broad view of the environment that we build. The yellow square right here represents the mysterious symbol of the tree. It is a trap that the wood evil set as it can bait out our protagonist's interest and lure him push deeper into the forest. You can see more and more symbol as our protagonist move around, and as he move forward, the fog appear and add a layer of uncertainty. Now switch to the second scene. You can see our poor botanist is still drunk in the excitement of his new discovery, but then a pair of eyes shows in the darkness. Botanist detects something, but the pair of eyes disappear as he moves his head around. The mist and fog grow stronger, but then there's a beacon of light pierces through the mist as it is calling to him. The mist moves aside and create a path for him, so he moves forward with cautious. Turn out the light source is a mysterious symbol that spotlight, and our botanist cannot hold his curiosity back and wish to observe the symbol closely. And that's the symbol on the tree. And he moved closer, wish to observe the symbol closely. Then, wait for a moment. Suddenly, the symbol bursts out a shockwave that pushed the botanist backward, and as he tried it again, he discovered that the shiny symbol is gone. Now it's a mask. The red square represents the mask that we're gonna show with a human feature. And then, the mask make a desperate howl and awake all the other masks inside the forest. Together, they make a crescendo of despair and pain. Our protagonist wished to escape, but he finds out that the mask begins to move toward him. The eye of the mask emits a horrifying wave of light, and then cut to black. In the next scene, after the black screen, we discover that the botanist has already become a mask that slowly fades into a symbol, transformed as a bait for the next victim that come visit this forest. That's it. And next, I'm gonna move to Ariana to introduce our 3D art aspect. So hand it to you, Ariana.
Thanks, Harry. Next, I will introduce our art development process. Next page. According to the story, we need a forest surrounding that is creepy and mysterious. We took the idea from the environment concepts that are included in the pre-package and completed the idea with more details. Here are some reference images from the internet. We want to create a horrifying dead forest. The forest environment should be foggy and gloomy. In addition, we want the trees to have extremely weird shapes to emphasize on the horror feeling. Next page. To design the trees, they have odd shapes, twisted branches, intertwined roots, and cracked bark. There will be no leaves on the tree because we want audiences to feel that this is a dead forest. The ecosystem will also reflect the liveliness of the forest. It's set in a dry, cold weather where withered grasses are all over the place. Broken tree trunks and rocks also appear in the forest. Next page. Now, let's move on to the modeling process. The major 3D assets we're considering are trees, musks, terrain, elements, and foliage. For tree creation, here is the pipeline I use. First, I use SpeedTree to procedurally model the rough shape of trees. Second, I export the file into Maya and tweak the shapes and meshes before adding details. Third, I sculpted the detailed look of the tree in ZBrush. Then I create material in Substance Designer and finally complete the look depth of the tree in Substance Painter. Next page. I choose to use SpeedTree to procedurally model the trees because we need a large amount of tree assets in this project, and procedural modeling is an efficient way to create many trees with similar styles but different individuals. Next page. When I sculpt one of the hero tree in ZBrush, I try to depict that the tree has very twisted forms. The branches, which are reaching out in a V shape, also help to guide audience's eye to the center node of the tree from where the musk will appear. Next page. Then I use Substance Designer to make a tree bark material and a moss material. Next page. I apply the material to the trees model in Substance Painter, and the image on the right is the final result. Next page. Finally, here are two render scenes in Arnold. The hero tree asset works pretty well in the scenes, and the details are all showing in the right way. Next page. For the ground material, I created in Substance Designer according to the research we did for the ecosystem of the forest. Next page. For the mask creation, we are aiming to create masks which look like realistic human face with cracks on top. Harry made several concept art of the mask, and JD created the 3D model of the mask based on the 2D concepts. Next page. Now let's welcome JD to introduce our production pipeline.
Yeah, thank you, Ariana. So I'll be introducing the pipeline we're using for this project. Next slide, please. Given the pre-package, we defined a pipeline that looks like this. So we begin with developing storyboards according to the pre-package, and then created animatics to log down the times for each shot. And then we started the asset production, which includes modeling the virtual environment and shooting the action footages. And then we composite the green screen footage and the environment render together. Next, we feed that composite into the post-processing process. And then we create some post effects and make color corrections. Next slide, please. During the development process, we meet challenges in footage shooting and rendering. Next slide, please. The main technical challenges for our footage shooting process are camera matching and green screen lighting. Since the character is moving in the foreground, After Effects will attempt to match points on the character. In order to get more accurate tracks, we max out the character to enforce the tracking focused on the green screen itself. Next slide, please. Another big challenge is the green screen lighting. Because our story happens in a dim environment, we want to match the light settings while shooting the footage. However, this results in the lack of light projected on the green screen. You can see the dark background become very difficult to key out, even with garbage mask applied. So we are expecting to have washout lights for the green background so that we can focus on lighting the character himself. Next slide, please. During the shooting process, we also iterated on the character silhouette, emphasizing the contrast on the character. You can see that we are removing the white sleeves on the character to emphasize that himself as a whole. Next slide, please. The main technical challenges for the rendering process are volumetric fog rendering and virtual lighting. We used layer rendering to handle both these challenges. So we render all the lightings and the fog in different render layers. In this way, we will have the ability to adjust each of them in our post-processing. So for example, if we want to increase the intensity of a light, we can just do that in Nuke instead of going back and re-render everything. So that speeds up our production process. Next slide, please. Here is a demo clip from our production shots. So it's not 100% complete. We're still iterating on the models and as well as the textures, but you can see that we have already successfully composite the character in different layers of fog. And next, I'll hand it over to Leon to talk about our future plans.
Thank you, JD. Now I'll talk more about our future plans. So for the pre-production package, we are currently preparing the pre-package based on our experience of this semester, and we try to deliver a package which will benefit a future team. So here I will show the time we schedule for our demo showcase and soft end later. So for the April the 5th, we are decided that be the demo showcase day, which means we will finish 60% of the full animation. And for the April 26th, which means the software will deliver the 100% completion of the whole animation. And for the final, which means the May the 10th, we will deliver the final product of the whole project. And based on that, we also are preparing and locked down about our pre-production concept and storyboard and animatics. So for the matrix of our team, we put the art style, innovation, documentation as our top 3 priority. Since we are a team of animation, the art style is definitely the top 1 priority of our matrix. And for the innovation, we have to figure out some ways to combine the live footage with the virtual environment in a limited green screen room. And also we are going to add some our experience to the ETC wiki so we can do some documentation. And that's why it's our 3rd priority. And we say special thanks to Steve, Christian, Michael, Ralph, Brenda, Catherine, Brian, Shirley, and other people who help us during the semester. So we are Team Fearless Nachos. We are making a live action animated film called Evil, story about a person lost in a consuming forest. And we are also preparing a pre-production package for a future animation team. And here we open for questions.
All right, congratulations, team. Way to go. And Ibrahim has a question. Who's the writer?
Ralph's got a question first.
Oh, Ralph, go first.
All right.
Yeah, guys, you may have mentioned this, I may have missed it, but how long did you say this final piece is going to be, the final product?
For now, our 3D animatics is about 3 minutes, but it's still subject to change regarding to our green screen footage's length.
Yeah, and the second part to my question is green screen. So have you been able to test with a rear projecting light onto a green screen? Have you been able to do that yet?
We're currently trying to use the LED, the big LED light to just light up the green screen, but maybe that's not enough. We think we need some washout
lights.
Yeah, the new light to light up the whole green screen.
All right, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Bob.
Hi, so I'm wondering, I know you're all artists. I'm wondering who did the writing for the story, because it's kind of super compelling and it has a nice interest curve. I wonder who did it.
For the writing, I think like the story comes along from the pre-package actually. It's also like shared by the previous team and also a part of faculty that the faculty actually provide us with more tones and insight of the story. So the story itself, the tone and atmosphere is basically settled once we got the pre-package. But yeah, we just make an adjustment and framework change based on the flow that we got. So
nice. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Mike, question?
Yeah, your moment where at the end the main character is gone and there's just a mask. What extra work are you doing to make sure that that mask that's left resolves to being the main character? Can you talk a little more about that, because it's really important?
Yeah, for sure. So for the final moment, we are trying to relate the mask with some facial features with our actor, which is Harry. And we are also placing a piece of paper that Harry is holding when he enters the forest. And we have the paper first blown away by the wind and then realize the mask. So we hope in this way we can make the mask more related to the character himself.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
We have time for one more.
I'll ask one more then, just to fill it out, because it's really interesting. I'm not sure what you're doing with color. It's night, it's dark, it's spooky and scary. Have you experimented with just a grayscale only deployment to see if color is adding anything, or are you going to do something interesting with color?
For the climax, actually, and for the live, because we are like, it's like a mixed media between the live shooting footage and also like mixing with the 3D. So if it comes with color, we played a little bit with the After Effect, but when it comes with lighting, we just do the we haven't actually played with the grayscale, but it's more about the light source that directly come from the live footage, and also how we adjust it through Adobe After Effects with the Lumetri color. So
but everything could be grayscale, right? Your live actor and your background, everything could all be grayscale.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you're going to experiment with that versus
definitely
having color. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you, Mike.
All right, congratulations, team. Great job. Good job for your halves. If you can turn your mics and cameras off. And help appear. You're up next. If you can turn your mics and cameras on, I will find you.
Right.
All right, that's all of you. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Drew. All right, so hello, we're Help Appear, and this is our Halves presentation. This is our team. Our faculty advisors are Jess and Mo. We're a student pitch project, and our goal is to help teachers run more effective group activities on Zoom and to do it more easily. Remote teaching may have only started to become more mainstream a year ago, but it is here to stay due to its convenience and flexibility that it provides students. We're using Zoom as our platform because it is already being used worldwide, it is free for everyone to use, and Zoom also allows us to develop features with our software developers kit. Group learning, however, it's really hard to do over Zoom. Most video conferencing software technology currently only supports automated random grouping. For any other type of grouping, teacher would have to manually put students into groups. This makes it really hard for teachers to utilize them in more useful ways. So why still do group learning? Research by Kumar has proven that students working with a partner and dialogue agent learn more than individuals without support. Research by Medeo and Nogan shows that struggling students will feel more comfortable verbalizing problem solving with their friends helping them. Research by Jennifer Olson also shows that individual learning combined with group learning was more effective than either alone. As you can see, group learning is such a powerful tool that has a lot of untapped potential in the remote learning space. So how are we going to do this? We consulted with CME researchers and with the teachers about what would be pedagogically effective and what would make their lives easier. We then came up with our design pillars: smart quizzing, smart grouping, and small group support. Our first design pillar is smart quizzing. Smart quizzing contains a simplified process for teachers to gather data on student performance through quizzes. This data, in turn, can improve their teaching. Our second design pillar is smart grouping. Based on research, We know that different kinds of groups are productive for different types of learning. Smart grouping provides teachers the tools to help students with what they need based on where they are. Our third design pillar is small group support. Small groups allow teachers to check on students like how they do in traditional classrooms and provide students with individualized attention. Our projects can help students connect with their peers and to help them with remote learning, while also be providing teachers with real-time access to data and an easy interface for grouping in Zoom that has a good learning curve. Our extension will be easy to install, uses existing technology, which will be easy for schools that already use Zoom to implement. Here are our metrics matrix. Here's how our metrics matrix will influence the deliverables that we're proposing for Help Appear. Since we're working with teachers, we want to make sure this is effective and we will be playtesting with them often. Our documentation and reference will contain features that teachers would like to have that is out of scope, recommended best practices for group learning, to just name a few points. This will prepare us for open sourcing our work this semester. And now I'll hand it over to Raya, who will talk about our design journey.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so we started off by resuming where we left off with pitching. And so we've begun the process with talking to various teachers and postdocs through introductions made by John Baelish and our faculty, Jess Hammer. And they were able to give us a lot of insights on both relevant points in the field as well as relevant literature. One of the most influential papers we encountered was a paper by Jennifer Olson, which discussed a pedagogical approach to grouping and classroom management. In particular, the paper depicted the strengths of homogeneous, heterogeneous, and random groupings in the context of different classroom activities. I'm sorry. The finding in this papers helped shape our understanding about the importance of careful grouping in peer-to-peer learning, and thus was a major influence in the formation of our design pillars. We also were looking at existing solutions in the space and how they are aiming to answer similar questions. One of these is ZoomSense, an application that gave tools and insights into managing breakout rooms. As gathered from our findings, this tool is strongly aligned with the needs of teachers in the space, and this was incorporated into our design pillars. Speaking of which, we were able to use our research and findings to really drive our design. These design pillars, which Karen talked extensively about, were synthesized with a combination of literature, interviews with teachers, and the technical possibility of our own team. From our early design pillars, we were able to start generating ideas about functionality needed to achieve our desired deliverables. So in our early ideation, we went through lots of ideation exercises of generating many ideas, as well as creating user journeys. And by combining them, we're able to create user flows where we're able to identify places where we can integrate creative design solutions in order to meet the needs of teachers. We also use this information to develop our MVP and what pieces we needed to get there. Now that we had an actual design, we're able to take our concept and bring it back in front of teachers. We were able to get a much better understanding about what teachers wanted to use, were willing to use, and were able to use in the middle of classroom. And at this point in time, because we had our functionality, we were also able to solidify our tech stack. This is actually where we encountered a lot of our initial setbacks. One of the biggest was ZoomSense, which I talked about earlier. So we found that ZoomSense was actually impossible to integrate into our application. And so even though it is a fundamental aspect of our small group support design pillar, we had to look for alternatives which we can support teachers in the same way. And we're still looking for solutions in this space. And we have a couple ideas of different paths to pursue, such as giving recommendations to students themselves about how they can be more actively engaged in group work, but also finding ways we can give teachers analytics about how much they are interfacing with individual breakout rooms. This is also roughly where we were at quarters. So we compiled our quarters feedback into about three main categories. The first of which is reaffirming project priorities. And this is things like advice about not getting too buried behind tech stack, settling for good rather than perfect, so we can be really fast and test with teachers as much as possible. Considering different use cases, such as maybe teachers want to use this outside of a purely academic setting, but also maybe teachers might want something else from our design pillars, like in smart quizzing, teachers might want to see work from the students or stuff like that. And finally, consideration beyond project semester. And this is in the capacity of building design that is usable, very usable, even if we aren't there to actively provide support, but also what we are planning to do with the project at the end of this semester. Yes. So from our investigations, we're able to return back to production. And so in particular from the user flow feedback, we were able to create rough wireframe drafts, which Lou was able to turn into interactive wireframes that we're using for user testing. From solidifying text doc, we were also finally able to lay down our golden spike and begin serious development. At this point, we also were able to identify which parts of our MVP need to complete first in order to run initial testing with our Windows application as soon as possible. And that brings us to where we currently are in our iteration phase. And so Karen and Lou are running lots of walkthroughs and think alouds and play tests with actual teachers on the interactive wireframes that Lou has been creating. And meanwhile, Bob and I have been taking agile approach to development or to develop in like a quick and flexible manner. And next I'll hand it to Lou, who will talk about our design.
Thank you, Ryan. In order to better help teachers understand and use our 3 pillars, we set 3 UI/UX design goals. The first, the easy flow. Prioritize the user's need to simplify the steps and design intuitive actions to guide users through the flow. The second goal is clear hierarchy. Categorize features, then highlight our 3 pillars to help users locate where they want to go efficiently. The third, simple UI. Apply a simple color scheme and art style to keep teachers focused on the class instead of the interface. And next, we're going to show you some examples of how we apply these goals. On the homepage, there are 4 sections. The big area on the left is the video feed from Zoom Embedded. Below is the participants and notes window. Because a lot of teachers really like the note feature, we designed it to show up at all times during the whole class. The right side is more like a control panel, where teachers can switch back and forth to monitor chat, release quiz questions, and create breakout rooms. And next, this is the teacher page. According to our conversations with teachers, they often have a busy schedule and have more than 2 different classes of students to teach. We applied a calendar layout to show a class overview that is color-coded to differentiate different classes. As they select a class, the detailed information will display on the right side. And next, for smart quizzing, we designed the card layout showing the questions to help with readability. And we designed a big use button that will turn into a screen share of questions with students. Instead of showing a pop-up window or having to go back to the class setting page, we create a new question form right here. This way, teachers can add new questions on the fly without blocking the class view and being distracted. And for smart grouping, according to students' performance on the quiz and teachers' grouping needs, the interface is designed to display automatically generated groups and will allow teachers to manually drag and drop each student to modify group formation. And next, Bob will talk about tech.
Hi, so thank you, Lou. So we wanted to make sure the tag can have these 3 things. We wanted to make sure it had the breakout room function so we can actually align with the pillar of smart grouping. We wanted to have a modern UI because it would basically have something that teachers are already familiar with and what they're already using. And since we're highly relying on iteration and feedback and playtesting, we want to make sure whatever feedback we get, we can actually iterate and plug it in the next iteration that we make. So if we look at Zoom, there's 4 different platforms that we can work with, and we checked all of them. The thing that seemed to mostly align was the Windows SDK, but we had a question mark about the modern UI UX. So that was the first challenge we had to face. So how would you work with it? So this is what we wanted, something that looked like a bit fluent design, but with the Zoom SDK, it works with WPF, and this is what it allows by default. So that was the first conflict that we had to do. And the way we mitigated that was using a private repo called Modern WPF, and that was able to mitigate that challenge. Another challenge we had was documentation tutorials. And the Zoom SDK is recent, 2016, meaning there's not much tutorials that span, but also there's also a paywall, meaning it's a small dev community, not people have accessibility to this SDK. And also the Zoom SDK is built on C++, which is kind of a niche platform to build a Win32 application on. So the way we mitigated around that is that we've been asking on the Zoom dev forum questions that we couldn't find documentation for quite easily. We've been doing small modifications on the SDK example provided by Zoom, and we've been using a C# wrapper to basically able to get all that resources that are made for C# instead. Another thing that we've been facing is debugging. A reason for that is because the Zoom SDK is made with pre-compiled code, meaning we can only run it in release mode. And because of that, when we break something, we don't know what line specifically broke it. So there's no way to trace it back. The way we've mitigated around that is separating the Zoom functions from the UI, following a bit of an MVC model view component, but we're only running in release mode when we need to. So we're testing UI and debug. When we need to put a Zoom function, we test it in release. And now we're going to go to Karen to talk more about playtesting.
Thank you, Bob. So far we have conducted one Think Aloud playtest, and we interviewed 7 participants who are either teachers or subject matter experts with a range of different teaching experiences and various comfort levels with navigating technology. This is a screenshot of a Think Aloud interview that we conducted. This is a screenshot of part of our Think Aloud protocol for our interviews. Teachers were giving remote control access to control the Figma interface. Here are some of the feedback that we sourced about our key design pillars. For smart quizzing, some teachers like being able to input quizzes ahead of time. Some enjoy being able to spontaneously put a question in class, and some of them like seeing real-time response from their students. Some of them are concerned, however, about the amount of time that teachers need to spend when inputting these questions. Some teachers also like to have students show their work while solving problems to see if they truly understood new concepts, and they're worried about how our extension does not provide that level of clarity yet. For smart grouping, some teachers enjoyed how easy it was to form these breakout rooms, visualize them, and performing drag and drop actions. Some of them, however, prefer to have their own control over building breakout rooms, and some of them mentioned that breakout room in general is intimidating for them to use. Here are some of the other feedback that we got that are unrelated to our key design pillars, but still interesting. Most of the teachers really liked the note feature, which is not something that we spent a lot of time on designing. Some found our tool grants flexibility for the class. Some also found our tool to have a low tech barrier and said that will be comfortable with handing this to less tech savvy teachers. Here's a timeline of our playtesting and development plan with our playtest partners for the rest of the semester. This week, we're going to show them the Zoom extension with MVP features. Next week, we're going to deploy the extension in class and conduct surveys and interviews with teachers in Allegheny Intermediate Unit 3 to learn about small group support implementation. We'll then enter into 2-week development sprints, followed by classroom playtests at the end of the sprints, and mock playtests at the end of each week. We'll then conduct a final summative playtest at week 14. We'll also introduce our project to remote learning participants if possible. Special thanks to all these faculty members, subject matter experts, teachers, organizations, and schools, especially John Belash, who has been generous in taking time to provide feedback and facilitate playtesters for us. We're Team Help Up here, and we're now open for questions.
All right, great job, team. Good job.
Got a question.
Looks like Ralph. Yeah, go for it.
Yay, John Baelish. Call out to John. Shout out. Yeah, baby. Okay, my question is a general question. Just in a sense of, is there an age group, an age range that breakout rooms do not work? Have you found a general question that, so what is the age range where you find breakout rooms actually are productive and actually work?
So the question is, what is the age range that breakout rooms will work, and what is the age range for breakout rooms that would not work effectively? I could answer partly that question. In one of our interviews we conducted with subject matter experts at the Quaker Valley District, they mentioned that it is not allowed for kids who are in grades 1 to 3 to even use breakout rooms. And from that interview, we also learned that grade 4 to 5, which is our primary playtesting audience, they're allowed to be in breakout rooms for 10 minutes per class. We've actually got to sit in with our one of our playtest partners, Nativity School of Worcester, and they actually have been using breakout rooms actively with their 8th grade students to be solving homework questions, and then they have a teacher in each breakout room to walk them through processes and show work. Is there anything that you would want to add to that question?
No, I think you got it. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh yeah, I was just going to add on, like, in terms of group learning as a STEM, like group learning is relevant at all levels of kind of age groups of learning, especially for younger children, in which like the social aspect of group learning is very, very important. But like Karen said, like there's a lot of technical difficulties with implementing breakout rooms at younger age groups.
Thank you.
I got a quick question about sort of your audience and what you're making. It sounds like you're talking to a lot of people and getting a lot of feedback on what they would like. At the same time, you kind of have a high level design goal to like sort of bring some group learning theory to teachers. And I'm kind of curious how you're balancing design decisions between what your audience says they would like and an overall design perspective to sort of keep you guys focused.
So the question is, and say if I didn't understand this correctly, how are we taking what the audience would really want as features and the research we have done and taking the scope of development into this semester into consideration, how we like balance all this?
Yeah.
With that, okay. Is there anyone who would like to take this question?
Yeah, you can go, Bob.
All right. So the way that we've been going at it is that we've been really focusing on these 3 pillars that we thought that was common between all these. And we've been getting like, oh, this is great. It would be nice if there was a little add to it. So we've been really focusing on smart quizzing, smart grouping, and smart group support. And when we show teachers, they've been really fascinated with how this project tackles it. But in their mindset, there's a workflow to them that makes it better for their niche. And the way we've been mitigating that, if it's not easy to plug in, if we don't hear it another time through another feedback system or when we do another playtest, then we don't prioritize it. That's the way we've been doing it. And we also been focusing on, all right, let's try to focus on the feedback that aligns with the pillars. And if it's easy to do, and also we have a backlog of priority lists, and we're making sure that we get the MVP first before we start any other features. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, thanks. Yeah.
Time for one more.
Question
Go
on
ahead, John.
surprise. Yeah.
So it's kind of unusual. I mean, these student pitches, you give us an idea and you set out and do your thing. Can you talk to a bit of knowledge or a breakthrough that you discovered that you weren't ready for?
Oh, I could take this one. So if anyone remembers on the pitch that we said public Pittsburgh High School. Pittsburgh Public High School is a school district. We discovered with John Baelish on week 1 that they use Microsoft Teams and don't use Zoom by default. Meaning it was going to be a challenge for IT-wise to plug that in. We also had another surprise is that Google Meets is a bit more popular in Allegheny County than Zoom because everyone is partnered up with Google for Education. So that was a curveball for us. And we had a bit of a discussion internally, like, is it even worth working with Zoom if everyone's using Google Meet? But that was something that we aligned with after Core's feedback.
I mean, I think all of us.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I think all of us encountered our own fair share of surprise. So, like, I think personally the most surprising thing is that if we're building an application for teachers to use in the classroom, we have to be very respectful of kind of what the classroom restrictions are and like the implementation restrictions. And to some degree, like we knew there would be some variability there, but we really didn't know how much that was going in. And so in particular, the thing that surprised me was like with what Karen said about the restrictions on younger students weren't allowed to even be in breakout rooms for longer than 10 minutes or for long in the class period. That was probably one of the most surprising things to me about like these kind of restrictions that teachers have with working with students in a practical sense.
I would say like the one of our design pillars we proposed, smart group support. We at the beginning of this semester we were looking into like Ryan mentioned, Zoom Sense, which is an app that is developed at Australia that really helps the teachers visualize what's going on in breakout rooms by the percentage of time that the breakout rooms participants is talking. At the beginning, we were really like hoping to implement that as part of our design, but due to limitations of overhead, how hard it is to set up with teachers, and like that didn't really quite pan out as in the way that we wanted it to. So like kind of currently we're looking into alternatives about how to really still try to realize this small group support pillar, because it is still really important for teachers to be able to visualize what's going on in breakout rooms in some way that we'll hopefully be able to streamline with Zoom.
All right, congratulations team, and good job to all the teams who went today. Congratulations. So we will see you all tomorrow morning for the next round of halves, and faculty will go grade. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.